So, John, I just got off a call earlier today. We weren't planning to have this conversation for this podcast episode, but it comes up in some way, shape, or form so often that I think it's worth us digging into. And it's this idea of the incorporated business owner eventually preparing for an exit. Okay, we've
Mm-hmm.
talked about exits before, but this one was a really interesting one. So I'm going to use it as a case study. This particular individual, we're just going to say he's from Canada. This person
Mm-hmm.
has experience in the education space, so we hit it off. They were administrators, and they've done some things. They understand how the education system works, right?
Education administrator, like a
Yeah,
principal.
exactly. And they've done some great things, and they've actually started a business, and they're really great at what they're doing. And
Okay.
ultimately, at the end of the day, they're at a place now where this business is, generating them enough for them to live off of. They're not taking a huge salary because like they don't need it. They're fairly, I would say, like
Hmm.
simple in terms of their spending. And probably, rightfully so, because they also want to make sure that, hey, they can be quote unquote financially free whenever they're ready to. And they're at an age now, I believe the age is somewhere around 55. And the one spouse is like not necessarily super eager to get out. The other one's getting a little tired in the business and is on more of the,
It's the
sort
educator
of.
mindset. 55 is when my retirement, I got into education. My pension said 55 was the day I was going to retire. That's my 80 factor, 85
Yeah,
factor. So
a
it's
hundred
like
percent.
you can imagine, like you can feel like as past educators, we can feel the, hey, that's my retirement, and therefore I hit it. I should be able to sit at home and eat bonbons.
Yeah. And I would even, I would argue like you and I as well, John. It's like we want one thing that we always said to ourselves when we went full time into, our entrepreneurial sort of journeys here. We were always doing the side hustle thing. We always had like a billion things going on. We loved it, kept us busy. We still, though, always said, like, hey, I think I would look back and regret if we hit our retirement, quote unquote, retirement age as an educator
Exactly.
and felt like we weren't able to live at least the same cash flowing
Right.
lifestyle that we would have had we stuck it out. Okay. So
Right.
that was a big goal for us. And, I'm happy and proud to say that, I mean, unless we do something completely, boneheaded,
Unless the
I think
business
we're going
goes
to be
belly
well.
up, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well, I don't know. Like maybe we invest in, this
That's
new
hilarious.
thing called, Bitcoin or something. I don't know, like whatever it is that, we can make a really poor choice. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's like, we're in a position where, we're good. We've got that checked off. And for this particular individual, it's sort of the same thing. And they certainly don't want to go and sit and eat bonbons. And I would argue most business owners, they also don't want to, like, oftentimes they just want to like remove themselves from that business because maybe that business has them growing tired. Maybe they just need a break. Maybe they just have wanted to maybe start something different, right? And I think a lot of times entrepreneurs are like that. They usually, like, you see so many founders out there. I mean, I don't know if you know this, but hey, PayPal, one of the founders of PayPal was Elon Musk, and
Yeah.
he sold that share and then went on to do this other thing called, I think, Tesla. And then now, he has got all SpaceX and all these things going on. So these people, like, we like to change things up. And in this particular case, they're at this spot where they're like, they have enough money, like they're paying themselves a small wage, but the business is retaining about $200,000 a year, which is fantastic. But the business itself right now is fairly heavily reliant on them right now in making it
Hmm.
as successful
Yeah.
as it is. So it's like it's going
So they're
really
needed.
well. They are needed, and they do take vacations. They do, like, they still have, I would argue, a little more freedom than maybe someone that was in a 9 to 5 and has to request vacations and things like that. But they're now starting to look ahead and say, like, with a 3-ish year runway, maybe selling the business. And we started chatting about, like, what might that business actually be worth to someone if they're going to take it over. But here's the caveat: they're going to take it over in order to try to produce the $200,000 in retained earnings that this couple, are currently really carrying all the weight on their shoulders in order for that money to happen, right? So meaning like this person's got to come in to buy a business that they either need to bring in people themselves to replace them confidently,
Okay.
or they need to replace, with themselves. Like they've got to come in, I'm going to pay a certain amount of money in order to get 200,000 of retained earnings, but I've got to either do the job myself and pay me for it, or I got to
Right.
hire someone to be able to do the job. And like, can they do the job? Do I have the right person to do the job? What's
Right.
this business going to be worth if I need this 200,000, but it's actually not a like turnkey business where it's not like I can just buy the business and know 200,000 is going to, hit my bank
Right.
account every year or hit my retained earnings every year
Right.
with my eyes closed.
So what you're saying is that they've got some options, but they're not. They in a way a non-conditional move is they want to continually have $200,000 in income for themselves, no matter what. Which is like if I sell it outright, I want to be able to always have $200,000 every year. I need to live on my retirement. That's my plan. If I don't sell it, if I hire a CEO or a manager to come operate it, then I need to generate retained earnings of $200,000 to send to the shareholders. And you're saying one is that it's not a saleable business yet. And if it is, I guess all businesses technically are saleable at some point. It just might not be worth what they think it's worth. And therefore, if I sell it for an amount, like I have to sell it for a good chunk of money so that I could then take that money and invest it to get $200,000 every year. Right. And it sounds like what you're saying is that that's not what it's worth.
Right.
Or what it's worth right now. And so their option is to get it ready so that it could sell for that type of money. And if that's the likelihood, then that is a no-brainer. If I could take the next 3 years to prepare my business in the way that it operates and generates retained earnings of $200,000, and it has a manager who's committed to making that happen for the long haul, then I don't have to sell my business. I can just make hire that person, which is a lot of work, but that's that's a pathway. I guess those are the two pathways that they have in front of them. Or they're not selling, or they're not doing anything, and then they have to just work for the 200,000 forever.
Right. Exactly. And we both know, at the end of the day, I think even just from a peace of mind standpoint, like even if they're like, like it turns out that I don't want to eat bonbons at home, like John's saying, and I actually want to work longer than 3 years. I think there is certainly a certain level of satisfaction if you're able to get your business to a place where you don't have to be there all the time to make sure everything's working. If you can get it to a place where it's working, it's a well-oiled machine, you get two aspects. One is you get your time back. But then the second one is you actually get more value for that business. And maybe that value of that business gets higher and approaches the point of which you can say, maybe it's closer to me investing in the markets or investing in something that's going to give me something closer to this $200,000 in retained earnings per year. But I would argue if, let's say, they're able to get $800,000 for this business in 3 years, I mean, that's only 4 times the retained earnings. Now, I'm not an expert in this particular business or this particular industry in terms of the multiples. Sometimes multiples work certain ways for certain businesses, but the one nuance that we know to be true is that unless the business is sort of operating on its own without necessarily having the person who's buying the business getting in there and doing the work, like the more work to be done by the buyer, the less it's worth, right? Like they're basically saying, I'm going to take a chance. It's just like when I'm buying real estate, right? If like all the rents are low, the property should sell for much less because it's like the current landlord didn't take the time, the effort to get everybody out and make sure they improved the units and made sure they got in nice, strong leases with great tenants and all of this stuff. Basically, what they're saying is, I don't want to do that work, and therefore I can't benefit from the additional uplift on this building. So the new landlord comes in and says, I am willing to do that work, but only for this price. And therefore there is sort of like a difference there, to be made. And with a business, the same is true. And I would argue it's almost even more important because at the end of the day, let's say I could get $1 million for this business. 10% a year on $1 million, I get $100,000. That's half of the retained earnings it's getting now. Now imagine I wave a magic wand And if I can spend these next 1, 2, 3 years reframing my focus from me being in the business and me rather working on the business with the new goal for me as one of the two owners of this business, the husband and the wife, if that person can go, my focus is really going to be about how do I make this more self-sustainable and put us in a position that maybe we get a great buyer with a great offer, or on the other hand, maybe we don't actually have to sell because this thing's working much like a machine. And between bonbons, as John would say, I would just make sure that the oil is in the machine and that the lights are on and everything's going the way it should with minimal interruptions compared to working right in the business 9 to 5 every single day.
Those are the options for sure. So where did this conversation go? Like, it sounds like you unpacked the scenario. They've conveyed, what moves that they could make. Where did this conversation end up?
Yeah, we landed somewhere in the middle, as is the case in so many scenarios where it was like, let's aim for this thing to be fairly self-sustainable, but let's not necessarily have a absolute thou shalt sell at the end or thou shalt keep at the end. We actually landed somewhere in the middle where they said, if I'm going to be bringing somebody into this business to maybe take on that person, that individual's role, if I bring in the right person and help to train and guide that person, in a perfect world, that would be the person that eventually runs the business over the long term. So then we started talking about how do you motivate somebody to want to do that work? Obviously a good salary that's going to attract a good employee, but will it keep that employee? So we started talking about profit sharing as an option. For example, hey, if the company's making 200,000 in retained earnings, I'll bring you in and pay you this much. And if you can help us build the retained earnings from 200 to 250, then we're going to share half of that upside with you. You get a $25,000 bonus or, and these are just numbers we're throwing around at this stage, or could it be, hey, listen, if you come on and you're the right person, you actually have the opportunity to slowly acquire some of the shares of this business gradually over time, which is really helpful from a number of perspectives. First off, they don't necessarily have to give up the entire company all at once, rip the Band-Aid off. And they can slowly over time, maybe it's over a 10-year period, slowly pass shares on as they're getting older into their slower go years of retirement. They may not want to have anything to do with it down that road. But there's so many different in-between options here that can be done while they're on this path to trying to make the business more self-sustainable without the actual owners being at the helm.
Those are good strategies. Let me ask you this. Why would you believe that they're it sounds like the non-negotiable is the $200,000 of income every year. And when you think about retirement, have they been, now these are past educators, you can imagine that it's okay, so why is that such a sticking point for them to start being creative around ensuring that the business operates to get that type of return forever? Whether they've, because you're sure they could structure that, right? That's in a way a great pathway to go down, and why wouldn't you if you could? But another point is is this it sounds like they want their $200,000 because that's their retirement strategy. And therefore they have to do this in order to make make themselves have income in their retirement and not do so much work. It makes me think about the two flywheels. They're still stuck on the first flywheel. What about their second flywheel, which is when you take your retained earnings every year in your flywheel and go, let's take that and what portion of my salary or my income am I putting towards my second flywheel, which is my investment flywheel, my flywheel that we want to turn on its own and generate more momentum because it does itself. It creates its momentum itself. It's real estate helps you do that in terms of investment. Your investments in terms of the stock market or maybe the dividend accounts that you're building will help do that. And when thinking about going, okay, is it so important that we get the 200,000 retained earnings every year so that they can contribute it to the flywheel, or they need it to live? And if they need it to live, where's the rest of their retirement amount? Like,
Yeah.
is that over here doing something different? And are we not blending the two things together? Because maybe the move is to sell the business and walk away from it and know that you're going to get less than your $200,000, or you're going to, let's say you get your million and it's only $100,000 every, that you could put into the markets, and you're getting all of a sudden $100,000 every year. That's your second flywheel in operation. But is there more second flywheel in operation somewhere that we're missing here?
Yeah.
In terms of like helping them make a good decision.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. They do have, I'm going to call it a smaller RSP. They actually did a lot of work abroad and things like that. So they didn't have as much RSP room as, say, maybe an Educator or a Lyra or something, if, they were Ontario teachers or whatever it might be.
Right.
So it's a great question. And actually, I actually was sort of the stickler on the 200,000. So they actually live on much less. They only need about, I would say, 80,000 after tax right now is what they're using and spending. So they actually have a very low requirement on that front. So part of this plan over these minimum 3 years, because remember, the original runway was like a 3-year idea here. A 3-year plan was, let's make sure we get as much of the retained earnings in the meantime going into the flywheel. But it might mean sacrificing a little bit of those dollars that could have went into the secondary flywheel, which is the investment, wealth building, your financial freedom flywheel. You might have to sacrifice a little bit of that in order to pay the new person coming in, right? So there is sacrifice in the shorter term. But then what you end up with the outcome, the ideal outcome here is that we get the right person in, we pay them a reasonable salary. They no longer have to pay themselves salaries because they're going to slide out. So the income that they're paying themselves now would slide over to this individual, and they'd still be able to continue using a part of that retained earnings to continue pushing on their secondary flywheel, the wealth building flywheel. However, you've made it very clear, like if we ripped the Band-Aid off now, they're in a position already, or by year 3 here, if they did nothing more, they're in a position where, if they are able to get $800,000, that's going to help them with the other 200 from the first year, 200 from the second year, 200 from the third year, which we're going to allocate, a significant portion to reasonable long-term assets. We can't get too risky if they're that close to retirement. And potentially, and this is a big one people ask, is like, well, what about corporate owned insurance? If it's only a 3-year run and then you're going to be out and you're done, you're not going to earn any more retained earnings, you've sold the business, I'd argue probably less of a, less an approach. You'd probably just slow drain out of the corporation and eventually close the corp, or keep the corporation open with whatever investments you have in there. But you wouldn't have enough retained earnings over a long enough period of time to really justify a significant policy in there. You might have something small just for your estate or something along those lines, but it would be more of a slow drain process. But if this business, if they do decide they want to stick around longer, or if they do want to sell, maybe they can sell for a larger number, those dollars are likely going to be enough for them to satisfy their retirement needs. The question is, are they willing? Are they okay with leaving all of that extra on the table? And these are some of the harder choices that we have to make, right? And for some people, it's like, I'm willing to leave more on the table just to be done and walk away. But based on our conversation, as I mentioned, these people are not planning to do nothing. And actually, one of the two is actually not wanting to leave the business within 3 years themselves. Like, they want to continue working in the business and doing some of that work. The other one isn't loving their role. So I'm like, hey, maybe we try to replace your role first, and then you can start focusing on some other aspect of the business. And, this is really, in my opinion, has seemed to light a bit of a flame in this individual to kind of look at this next sort of phase as maybe being different than the role they're in now, which might be exactly what they wanted or needed, so that they aren't just walking away completely and sitting at home doing crosswords, right?
Right. Yeah. And you know what, this is a case study we're unpacking, and this is typically, what we do with our clients when we hop on calls with them, or people who are just looking for bouncing ideas off of. And I think that's It sounds like when you said lit a fire here is that when they got on this call from you, what they really needed to do was talk through their strategies, and you helped them talk through those strategies so that they could see what their next steps were, which is what we try to do with everybody, is that we are an education first, I guess, firm. Canadian Wealth Secrets itself, we're focused on educating people and giving people recommendations based off facts, based off key understandings. We want to do that for you. Sounds like you did that here for this team. And they stepped away from that call with a clearer vision of their financial plan, which is one of our 4 zones of a healthy financial plan. 3 being a wealth reservoir is the second, which is like this opportunity fund slash emergency fund slash investment fund that has multiple purposes, can be flexible at the same, and as well as liquid at the same time. The third zone is about optimizing and thinking about sustaining moves. So structure and optimization. Sometimes these are tax efficient strategies that you do need to consider. It's an important part of a healthy financial wealth planning system. And then the fourth part is in a way, we talked about the fourth part here today too, which is about legacy planning and estate planning and thinking about sunsetting or thinking about, exiting businesses, and how do we do that strategically to help us achieve our goals and help us, move our wealth from one generation to the next. So sounds like, this call helped them get that clarity they need in terms of their vision and also develop those strategies for that fourth component.
Well, and the beautiful part about it is, they're exploring. We've given them some things to read from our book list. One of the books is Traction. It's a great starting point for them to begin. The other aspect is, because we aren't a fee for service company, we're an education first company. We're working with these clients to help them determine what does their future, their vision look like. We're really in stage 1 right now. And as we work through that, there are going to potentially be some opportunities for us to assist them along the way, whether it's the wealth management side, having them work with our wealth management arm, whether they do end up requiring to need some sort of corporate owned insurance, be it for long-term estate planning or potential leverage opportunities. We're going to be exploring that along the way. And the beautiful part is there is never an obligation for the client to work with us. So this is something that, we're going to extend out to the Canadian Wealth Secrets community. We love digging into these conversations, and we love helping to educate you more to determine what is a good fit for us to help us reach those goals, what's worth leaving behind, even though maybe on paper it might make sense, and what should I be hopping on right now. So if you're interested to learn more, you should reach out to us over at CanadianWealthSecrets.com/discovery, and you can book your free call for us to hop on and try to make sure that you get at least one big takeaway and a whole bunch of learning.
Just a reminder, the content you heard here today is for informational purposes only. You should not consider this information as legal, tax, investment, or financial advice. Kyle Pierce is a licensed life and accident, sickness, and surgery agent and the president of corporate wealth management here at Canadian Wealth Secrets.